The only guarantees in life are death, taxes, and these days, video game remakes. The 2001 Game Boy Advance game Advance Wars and its 2003 sequel Advance Wars Black Hole Rising are no exception. War. What is it good for? About 80 combined hours of satisfying, if still a bit dated feeling strategy brain scratching. What? Oh, was that licensed? Shit. I'll get it out of the way early. I'm coming into Advance Wars as a newbie with almost zero expectations. The original came out when I was 4 years old, and despite owning a Game Boy Advance SP, a dense turn-based strategy game just didn't spark the little light bulb in my child brain. The story is a simple one. You take on the role of a commanding officer in the Orange Star Army, a faction that seems to collect conflicts like their Pokemon cards, but is trying to establish peace in a time of war. It's mostly there to facilitate the copious amounts of stuff you'll be blowing up. The battlefield is not too dissimilar to a chessboard, with each side taking turns to move their pieces into position with the goal of wiping out the enemy or destroying their HQ. Battles can be fought from many fronts, be it on the ground, in the sky, or on the sea. Depending on the situation you've tripped into, there's a dizzying number of things to remember for those just starting out. Thankfully, tutorials are neatly woven into the campaign, rather than just info dumping everything on you all at once. And for those returning players who don't need a refresher, these can be skipped to get you right into the action. Said action can be played in either casual or standard, depending on how thoroughly you want to be humbled, as the AI steadily increases the difficulty each encounter. Some battles took upwards of half an hour for me to get through as I rolled out my tanks, dunked my submarines, and double-checked the attack range of an enemy even though I just looked at it a second ago. Every piece on the board has a role to play. There are no wasted units. Ground troops are needed to capture cities and claim the enemy HQ, heavy artillery provides the firepower, and naval and air forces can provide a line of sight on hard-to-see enemies. It took me a while to find the balance between them all, but the struggle to get from point A to point B feels so worth it when you land a solid blow, or manage to weave a strategy out of a skirmish.
I lost?
Getting familiar with each unit's strengths and weaknesses is easy enough, with handy info packets available for your perusal at any time. But like any strategy game, the true delight of Advance Wars comes when you manage to pull those pieces together. In one mission, I managed to keep the enemy pinned down in one location with tanks and infantry, while also running a counter operation on the other side of the map. It may seem tiny, but the sense of accomplishment I felt, knowing I'd not only formulated a plan, but pulled it off successfully, stellar. I wasn't a fan of the fades to black between moves though. Even with the fast forward on, they really grind the action to a halt, and I'd often find myself left a bit disorientated after a wave of enemy attacks, trying to remember what's changed. The learning curve is a steep one, but with the ability to reset your turn, you can go on about making course corrections as you go, and Nell is always around to provide useful feedback and strategies should you have to yield. There really isn't any punishment for failure. Speaking of which, a moment of silence for all the faceless soldiers we lost while I was, testing out enemy defenses. I'd tell your families you made us proud, but you don't have names, so roll clip. I've seen a few people describe this as a wholesome war game, and I can kind of see where they're coming from. The new 3D art style, which I'm personally not a big fan of, gives off the impression of little plastic toy tanks being bashed together in a sandpit. Even the way soldiers are flung off screen when they hit zero is cartoony. COs banter back and forth like they're in their own little world, and it's funny, don't get me wrong, but it's a bit discombobulating when just seconds ago I'd gotten a whole tank load of troops blown up. Reboot Camp does also have online and offline multiplayer, with up to 4 players being able to play locally on the one Switch, or in 1v1 online. There's also the design room, where you can make and share your own creations. The simple UI makes selecting terrain, troops, and war assets a breeze, even if it's just to mess around for a bit. Despite not having a history with the series, I came away with a much better understanding of why people have such fond memories of the original Advance Wars. The single-minded focus this brought me was unreal. While newer titles have stepped up and more than held their own in the turn-based strategy arena, Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp does a great job of updating this old classic for a new generation to enjoy. Whether you're a newcomer or an old-timer, play.